Although Five Nights at Freddy's is filled with all kinds of weird details and many subjects up for debate, one that keeps pulling a William Afton and always coming back is the Midnight Motorist minigame from FNAF 6. Many different fans and theorists have proposed lots of possibilities for the true story behind this cryptic minigame, but today I want to step in and present what I believe could be the true story of Midnight Motorist, as well as why this minigame is not about William Afton and his family, as well as some crazy new theories on the minigame I found, including an insane one I made on how the big bad of the story is hiding right in plain sight. So strap in, because today, I'll be solving Midnight Motorist. Midnight Motorist is a minigame from Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator and one of 3 secret minigames that the player can find by playtesting different attractions in their pizzeria, namely Fruity Maze, the Security Puppet, and of course the Midnight Motorist arcade. The main Midnight Motorist gameplay is pretty simple, as it's basically just you racing through a highway avoiding oncoming cars. The secret part of the minigame, however, is way more interesting. On the 4th lap, if you stick to the bottom of the screen, you'll see a hole that your car can fit into, which will take you into the true Midnight Motorist minigame called Later That Night in the code. I won't recap all the events of the minigame in detail, as I'm sure you know what I'm talking about if you clicked on this video, but suffice it to say that the identity of the 3 human characters we're introduced to in the minigame, the player, who I'll call Mustard Man, the Couch Person, and the Runaway, are very heavily debated in the theorist community, and it eventually falls down to 2 camps. The one that states Midnight Motorist is about William Afton and his family, and the one that says it isn't. And although I used to believe that Mustard Man was actually William, I don't think so anymore. In fact, I believe Midnight Motorist is all about a completely different FNAF family. So let's go into the evidence for both sides. The theory that Midnight Motorist is about the Afton family is much more popular and has many more believers, including big theorists in the FNAF Theory YouTube community. But it's actually pretty funny because none of them seem to agree on which members of the Afton family are actually being shown here. While most of these theorists think Mustard Man is William Afton, the identities of the Couch Person and Runaway are debated, with some people stating that the Couch Person is Michael Afton and is the Runaway's crying child, and others believing the Runaway to be Michael and the Couch Person to be Mrs. Afton. It's also stated that the Juniors bar we see earlier in the game is a rebranded Freddy's location. The point is, the Afton side of the debate is pretty complex, but if I have to pick one of these options, it's that Michael is the Runaway. However, I don't think the player character of Midnight Motorist is William Afton, and neither is Junior's a rebranded Freddy's. In fact, I think there's another, much more likely option. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me explain why I don't think William is the player character of Midnight Motorist. First off, the most obvious thing is the color of our character. He's yellowish orange and not purple. The most probable reason for him not being purple is that a purple character would be literally invisible against the minigame's background. A lot of people say that he's yellow because it's on the opposite side of the color spectrum to purple, and while that's true, if you invert Mustard Man's sprite, he becomes blue, not purple. One of the biggest pieces of evidence people use for the William MM theory is that the name of the minigame in the code is Later That Night, and just by the rainy background, it felt like this was implying the minigame happened right after the death of Charlotte Emily. However, there's a major issue with this theory. Going off of the Take Cake to the Children and Security Puppet minigames, Charlie's death almost definitely happens at a Fredbear's location, because of the different Freddy sprite and smaller location, as well as an animatronic we never saw in the Freddy's location before, namely the Security Puppet. And before you use the excuse that Fredbears didn't even exist during FNAF 2, it did. Phone Guy literally brings it up on the last night.
We're going to try to contact the original restaurant owner. I think the name of the place was Fredbear's Family Diner or something like that.
And since William's house is literally right next to Fredbear's in FNAF 4, he wouldn't need to drive all the way back from there to get home after killing Charlie. After all, the player character is literally using a car to get from place to place. As well as that, the stuff Mustard Man says upon seeing that his own son was kidnapped is really strange. He says that he ran off to that place again, the place most likely being Freddy's, judging by the animatronic footprints right next to the window. But since William is quite literally the guy who made Freddy's, he wouldn't call it that place, but rather Freddy's or Freddy Fazbear's or something like that. Since we're on the subject of William's home, it looks completely different to the FNAF 4 house. There's only 3 rooms, the windows on the outside are different, and most glaringly important of all, it's now in the middle of the woods, not in a busy populated neighborhood. Unless Fazbear Entertainment bulldozed all the houses and kids around the area, this doesn't really make sense. Making the Midnight Motorist house look like the FNAF 4 one wouldn't have been hard at all, so I think this was a deliberate choice by Scott. Some people have said that Junior's is actually Fredbear's, but regardless of whether this is what it looks like before or after its closing, why wouldn't William be allowed in? The argument that he drank too much and that Junior's is a bar makes sense, but the Green Man explicitly says he's just not allowed there, not anything else. This establishment is explicitly banning Mustard Man. Plus, there's not too much proof it's a bar, leaving the identity of the establishment up to debate. In the minigame, there's also an unmarked pile of dirt that can be found on the way down the road. And while many theorists say this could be anything from the crying child's corpse to the sister location bunker, Mustard Man doesn't react at all to the pile of dirt. There's no free dots, no dialogue, no change in mood, it's just a pile of dirt. But I think this is actually immensely important, and I'll bring it up soon. The player's car being purple likely means nothing. All the other cars in the first section of the game are purple, there's a random purple car in FNAF 4, and Jessica from the books owns a purple car too. The rest of the FNAF 6 minigames are also about some of Afton's victims, Susie and Charlie, so why should this one be any different? The discussion around the TV person is interesting, but since we never see Mrs. Afton in the games or even books, I'm not too strong on that aspect of the hypothesis. I don't think Mike would protect the crying child in a mature way that the TV person does, since his whole character is all about bullying the kid. So both possibilities for the TV person's identity under the Afton MM theory feel strange to me. The Runaway, however, is where this gets pretty interesting. So let's talk about the other possibilities for the identity of Mustard Man and the overarching story of Midnight Motorist. The first, and arguably most popular alternate theory for the true identity of the Midnight Motorist Runaway is labeled the Andrew MM theory, and just by the name, I'm guessing you know what this one's about. The infamously controversial character that got me noticed by Twitter, Andrew FNAF. This theory admittedly has some standing. In the Fazbear Frights books, Andrew says he hasn't had a friend in a long time, implying that he had a friend once, and Spring Bonnie is infamous for tricking kids into a sense of false security and pretending to be their friend or help them, meaning Andrew could have thought Bonnie was friendly and gone with him. Apart from some minor implications throughout the rest of the Stitch Ray stingers, that's sort of where the evidence ends as far as I'm aware. But if there's anything about Andrew MM I missed, let me know in the comments, and leave a like and subscribe while you're at it. Anyway, there's a much more convincing second theory that has really grown on me recently, and that is the Gabriel MM theory. For those of you who don't know, Gabriel is an MCI victim, and most likely the one that goes into Freddy Fazbear himself. The main reason why he's a good candidate for the role of the Runaway is because of FNAF Help Wanted's final minigame, Pizza Party. In the game, you're lured out of your house by Glitchtrap and eventually end up in a Freddy Fazbear's pizzeria, getting stuffed into the Freddy animatronic as Glitchtrap looks on. The newspaper clippings never specify that the MCI kids were all taken from Freddy's, just that they went missing there, so William could have easily gone to get a kid from a random person's house. But this is where it gets insane. You see, at the beginning of the video, I said that the big bad of Midnight Motorist was actually hidden in plain sight all along. And I didn't mean Mustard Man, because the green guy we see outside Junior's could just be none other than William Afton. Remember how I brought up that if we color invert Mustard Man, he becomes blue? Well, I found out that if you do the same thing to green guy, he turns into a very familiar shade of pinkish purple. The wall of Junior's also becomes a light blue, of a shade pretty similar to the wall of Fredbear's in FNAF 4. So what does this mean? Well, first off, the green guy is the only character close enough to Mustard Man's house to easily kidnap a kid. If Junior's is a separate Fredbear's location, even if it isn't open or the one in FNAF 4, he could have easy access to a Spring Bonnie suit by working at the location as a bouncer. Think undercover boss, kind of like what he did in FNAF 2, meaning he could kidnap a kid and easily get away with it, explaining the footprints outside the player's house. Whether this kid could be Gabriel or not is unclear, since that would make it a bit weird for William to go all the way to Freddy's from said location with some random kid. But then again, it's likely Fredbear's and Freddy's aren't too far away from each other and are both in Hurricane, Utah, since the novels show they're pretty close by. Maybe William did what he did with Garrett in the FNAF movie and drove away with Gabriel? If the kid isn't Gabriel, but rather an anomalous victim like Andrew or someone else entirely, it's possible Green Guy, aka William, killed the Runaway and buried him next to Junior's, explaining the amount of dirt in the clearing. After all, William seems to have a thing for hiding corpses in or right next to the place of the crime. There's also another interesting Midnight Motorist theory that says the Runaway is actually a nightmare experiment victim like Rory from the tale story Didophobia. Rory also ran away from home, so maybe Afton was kidnapping multiple different kids to use in his bunker. I won't go too in detail on the animatronic that created the footprints next to the house, since I've talked about that a lot already in the past, but I like the idea of it being just Spring Bonnie. The only issue is the rain, which would trigger the spring locks, meaning the footprints would have to be pretty aged. Lastly, the name of the minigame itself, Later That Night, could refer to the night of the MCI. The FNAF 1 newspaper clippings and the news report from the Freddy in Space Free FNAF movie footage all confirm it took place in the later hours of operation at Freddy's. To recap my train of thought, I think that the most likely option for the true identity of the Midnight Motorist Runaway is either Andrew if the books take place in the game's continuity, or Gabriel if they don't. The green guy next to Juniors could be William Afton and the one who kidnapped the Runaway, and the mound of dirt either an entrance to Afton's bunker and nightmare experiments or the corpse of one of William's victims. As I said at the beginning of the video, I don't think Midnight Motorist is about the Afton family, but it does have William show up in it, in a pretty cool twist. After all, William is, indirectly, in every single FNAF 6 minigame. Thanks for watching. Remember to leave a comment with your opinion on the theory if you enjoyed, and like and subscribe. Next week is the 1-year anniversary of my first ever theory video, which means I'll be unlisting my older theories and putting out something special for all of you to enjoy. Remember to check out my Twitter account as well to see theories I'm cooking up early, and some of the other links in the description. With that, friends, remember, keep on theorizing and never stop overthinking.